Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we have another Old World Almanack today. This is focusing on magic, so how magic brings back a sparkle to the battlefield. There's a few things to discuss and there's also a lot of information. I had a quick read through the article, so yeah, let's discuss. What would Warhammer be without magic? Without the ever-present risk of having your proud regiment of silver helms toasted by a well-directed fireball, or your black orcs being grappled by dwellers below. Oh my god, yeah, dwellers below. That's a spell and a half. Obviously we can see a really cool piece of art here, but let's continue. The four-phase structure of Warhammer the Old World is perhaps the biggest break with the previous installment of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Not least because there's now no set magic phase, but that doesn't mean that the arcane arts take a back seat. If anything, magic is even more prevalent as it's cast during every phase of the game. Wizardry 101. Warhammer the Old World is set at a time before the colleges of magic were established. Imperial wizards are still very much around and tapping into the 8 winds, but the study of magic had yet to be so formalized in the human lands. That's not to say that there aren't laws. There are 8 laws in the core rulebook alone, each representing a particular approach to the study of magic. Alright, so we got the 8 laws here. Battle magic, which, interesting. You know, battle magic back in the day was just the standard 8 laws, right? Like, you know, the color magic. I guess that's being changed. Dark magic, demonology, elementalism, high magic, illusion, necromancy, and war magic. Oh, so we're not getting the law of the big war and the little war anymore. That's a bit of a shame. I could be wrong. It just seems like they're kinda making the 2 laws into one, which I guess makes sense, but you lose a bit of individualism. Let's continue. Most mages will have access to 2 or more of these, selecting 1 law at the start of each battle. Okay, yeah, I mean the typical stuff. Got some elven art here. Very cool. Interesting that we see some winged flyers in the back. I guess this was for Wood Elves. Yeah, this was for Wood Elves, right? Back in the day, in the 7th edition book? I might be wrong there, but let's continue. Each law has 7 spells, with 1 being a signature spell that's always available to its adherents. Every magic user has a level running from 1 to 4. The higher the level, the more puissant the wizard, and the more spells they know at the start of the game. So yeah, very much like Warhammer Fantasy already. That's kind of cool. I mean, it makes sense. I'd rather this than going into a system where they know every single spell in a lore, because that would be terrifying. Now we got the spell categories, which there's 6 of them. Spells fall into 6 categories. These determine during which phase of the game they can be cast. These are enchantment spells that empower the caster's allies, protecting them with sorceress wards and magically enhancing their fighting prowess. Hex, the opposite of enchantment spells. Yeah. Spells that weaken the enemy in some way, perhaps slowing them down or sapping their strength. Conveyance. These spells enable wizards to enhance movement or transport units from place to place. I mean, yeah, I was expecting this when we saw High Elves, because they had a pretty fast teleporting spell back in the day. It's likely that's going to be the same here. Let's continue. Magical missiles, again, something very typical. These are sorcerous projectiles that the wizard hurls at foes. Magic missiles can only target enemy units. Magical vortex. These are rolling globes of magical energy that travel across the battlefield, wreaking all kinds of havoc. I wonder if they're going to be permanent? Like, well, I don't know. Was that said in a previous article? Because it was one of these things where you could easily get screwed by your own vortex. And finally, assailment. These spells are deadly attacks that strike the foe without warning. So, likely dwellers below and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, so far, all of them, it's pretty much Warhammer Fantasy. It's just different phases rather than all in the same phase. So we get a little bit more detail here. There are 6 types of spell. Enchantment and Hex, strategy phase. Conveyance, movement phase. Magic missile and magical vortex in the shooting phase. Assailment in the combat phase. These are cast in the appropriate phase, so units can end up in enchanted or hexed from the outset of your turn, magically moved when it's time to charge, and blasted with arcane power when the rest of the shooting happens. Each conjuration has a casting value appropriate to how complex it is, and spells are cast on 2d6. Adding the skill level of the caster, it's a quicker system than the previously used Winds of Magic cards or pool of dice, leaving the tactical decisions of what to cast and when I mean, this doesn't sound too bad, to be honest. It actually sounds pretty good. It's definitely going to be better for those low-range spells, because if you remember stuff like Dwellers Below and so on, they didn't really have too much of a high range unless you supercharge them. And one of the things there is, you know, your first turn, you wouldn't really be casting too much unless you had a really high range spell. Same thing with sometimes the second. So this looks like you might be able to cast a lot more. At least that's my interpretation of this, and to be honest, I kind of like what I'm hearing. And this is the moment I've been waiting for. The miscast table is back. Yeah, I kind of expected this to happen, and some people are going to be worried. I like the idea of a miscast table, so let's read over it. If a natural double 1 is rolled when making a casting roll, regardless of the casting result, it has been miscast. So double 1 this time rather than double 12. And unless stated otherwise, it is not cast. Roll immediately on the miscast table below to see what fate befalls your unfortunate caster. So 2 to 4 is Dimensional Cascade. The summon magic breaks free, creating an ethereal tornado. Center a 5-inch blast template. Templates are back. Yes! Over the wizard. Every model, friend or foe, whose base lies underneath the template risks being hit and suffering a single strength 10 hit with an AP of -4. Oof. Oof. I mean, the 5-inch isn't too big. There is a smaller one, as you can see here, because on a 5 to 6 we get Calamitous Detonation. Rolling magic explodes from the wizard in a flash of light. Center a 3-inch blast template over the wizard. Every model, friend or foe, whose base lies underneath the template is at risk of being hit and suffers a single strength 6 hit with a AP of -2. That's not too bad. It's interesting. So 3-inch, 5-inch. I'm a massive fan of templates, and I've always been, so it's just going to be so cool to see them return into the battlefield, especially for certain spells if they work in a similar way. But let's continue. Obviously, here we've got on A7, Careless Conjuration. The wizard mispronounces a syllable, causing the spell to backfire. Knocking them to the ground, the wizard suffers a single strength 4 hit with an AP of -1. Then 8 to 9 is Barely Control Power. The wizard manages to control the magic, but at the expense of great power. The spell is cast at its casting value for the purpose of dispel attempts. Good, dispels are still a thing. However, you cannot attempt to cast any more spells for the remainder of the current turn. Fair play, fair play. If you get this issue, you wouldn't be able to cast for the rest, and this is just with this specific spellcaster. So if you've got multiple spellcasters in your army, which I imagine will still be possible, you're still fine. And then finally, 10 to 12, which is Power Drain. With a deafening boom, the summoned magic is unleashed and an unnatural calm descends. The spell is cast with Perfect Invocation. However, you cannot attempt to cast any more spells for the remainder of the current turn. So that means, likely, Perfect Invocation. I think that's going to be mentioned in the article, where it's going to be something like it just can't be dispelled, which is kind of cool. No sucking the wizard into the warp, though, or losing levels, which is a good thing. That's actually a very good thing, because that was always frustrating. So, yeah, okay, let's continue. Alright, so magic is still very much a duel between opposing wizards. It's still perfectly possible to miscast should you roll a double 1 or achieve a perfect invocation or a double 6. What's more, every spellcaster can attempt to dispel their opponent's conjurations, provided they're within 18 inches as first and second level casters, or 24 inches at level 3 or 4. Roll a 2d6 and add your level to the roll. If you beat the casting roll, the target spell is cancelled. A double 6 counts as unbinding, dispelling no matter the casting roll, but should you roll a double 1, you've been outclassed in the act, and you must roll on the miscast table. Is this saying that even dispels can be miscast? That sounds a bit risky. I mean, obviously that allows for more risk. That's the way I'm interpreting it. I think that's going to piss some people off. I'm already sure I've got a comment just like complaining about that. But let's continue. We got some really lovely dwarf art here. I've actually been rebasing a few dwarfs recently. You guys have seen a fair amount of my dwarfs on the community tab. But let's continue there. What's more, both casting and dispels rolls can be modified by the wealth of magic items available to wizards and a number of special rules. It's a real battle of arcane wits out there. Okay, so we're going to be able to get likely a dispel scroll and stuff like that. Oh, I imagine so. If the player finds themselves unable to attempt a wizardly dispel, they can make one fated dispel per turn, an unmodified 2d6 attempt. To offset this, certain units, notably dwarfs, have an innate resistance to magic, making it harder for enemy wizards to cast spells upon them successfully. Okay, yeah. Yeah, even dwarves have some recourse to the arcane. Runesmiths are perfectly capable of making these spell attempts. Okay, cool. So at least the dwarves are still going to be there. Are they going to miscast also? Because it's a bit weird. I still feel like if that's the case, if dispelling is going to give you a miscast, it's going to take some getting used to, that's for sure. Alright, so now we get something really interesting. We get the rules on damsels. Damsels causing distress. We get some old artwork there. Very cool artwork at that. I think I actually have that miniature. I've got a few damsels that I've been painting up, mostly on warhorses. But let's talk about everything here. So let's take a closer look at one of the first spell slingers to be released next year. The Bretonnian Handmaiden of the Lady. From the lowliest first level damsel to the mightiest prophetess, these formidable priestesses of the Lady of the Lake may pick from 3 spell laws: naturalistic elementalism, tricksy illusion, or battle magic, for when a direct approach is best. Man, I'm so curious about these spell laws like elementalism and illusion and stuff. I mean, it's new, and to be honest, when I think of illusion, I think of more factions in the Southern Realms area, but yeah, very, very interesting. So we have some rule sheets here, which is really, really cool. So the prophetess, damsel, the base size. This is cool. The fact that it says all the base size. 25 mil. We already knew this for a while. Unit size 1. The equipment's a hand weapon. It's a level 3 wizard. There's a prophetess. And a damsel's a level 1. Every handmaiden of the lady knows the spells from one of the following laws. We already know that already. They may be mounted. It costs 30 points to upgrade them to a level 4. They can get the usual. So actually, this is quite good. So if they're level 3 to 4, they can get up to 100 points of magical items. If they're levels 1 to 2, they can get up to 50 points. Then we get some special rules here, like Aura of the Lady, Blessing of the Lady, Law of the Lady, magical attacks, magical resistance -2, and Shield of the Lady. That's a lot of the ladies. We're going to hope to get, like, proper faction breakdowns. They did this with, like, 40k, and I think they did this with 30k when the new edition launched. Well, it makes more sense with 40k because everything is so varied. Same thing here. And getting some faction-specific articles will be incredibly helpful as, yeah, you know, there's a lot of special rules coming into effect. Some of them that we likely already know. Some of them we don't know just yet. Alright, so we have the details for the unicorn here, but it can also be noted that the article also mentioned that the spellcasters for Bretonnia can have the following mounts: Warhorse, Bretonnian Warhorse, so I'm assuming barding, Royal Pegasus, so we can get a flying spellcaster, or a unicorn, which is what we have here. Movement 10 on a unicorn, +1 wound, that's actually quite good. That's going to make it a lot easier than just like, oh, you just kill the thing with the highest wound count, because a lot of people got confused about that. Let me see. The base size is 40 by 60. That looks a little bit too large. But then again, we've seen the unicorn in one of the other characters that was being shown off, at least Ducard, and that looks like it's going to be a larger base size than the warhorses. The warhorses were speculated to be on 30 by 60s, just a little bit thinner. They get to attack with hooves and horns, counts as hand weapons, so that gives them 2 attacks. Armor Bane 2, the unicorn only. Armored Hide 1, so you get a bit more of a save. Beguiling Aura, countercharge, cool, countercharges there. Magical attacks, Stomp attack, stomps are back, good. And Swift Stride. Okay, yeah, all stuff that you kind of expect on a unicorn. Unicorns were actually fairly decent in terms of, like, doing damage back in the day. I mean, weapon skill 4 and strength 4 is actually not bad. Initiative 5 too, it's pretty good. Right, we get a little bit more information here about her. She's at her best when she's joined by a unit, as her aura confers magical attacks and magical resistance -2 to the brave men and women she leads. And her Shield of the Lady ability allows her to seek sanctuary in the back rank, where she can cast her spells untroubled by the aggression of the foe. Awesome! Okay, that's actually quite good. So this means that I can move in her with a Death Star of, say, for example, you know, knights or men-at-arms with halberds, and she won't be picked off by the vampire that I'm fighting against, in a sense, right? Those of you who played back in the day will realize, remember, that Blender Lords would just target there because it would just be base contact, right? Let's continue. As a battle magic user, her signature spell is Hammer Hand, an assailant cast in combat to add considerable threat to the charge of the noble knights who flank her. Elementalists can storm call an enemy unit, slowing them and dulling their wits to soften them up for a charge, while illusionists may cast Glittering Robe on their allies, making them harder to hit in combat. No Knight of the Realm should leave the keep without a damsel in tow. Okay, I mean that sounds pretty cool. So let's talk about these spells. We've got Hammer Hand, a signature spell. An assailment spell, casting value of a 7+. It needs to be in combat. A single enemy unit with the casters engaged in combat suffers 2d3 strength 4 hits, with each with an AP of -2. I mean, that's not too bad. God, I hate d3s. I mean, it should have just been 1d6, right? I mean, it kind of works because you're likely to get more hits out, but it's still annoying. I hate d3s. Alright, so Glittering Robe now. This is an enchantment spell with a casting value of 8+, range on self. Until your next start of turn subphase, enemy units suffer a -1 modifier to any rolls to hit made against the caster and any unit they may have joined. If this spell is cast, the effects of any other enchantments previously cast on any of the affected models immediately expire. Okay, so you can't have multiple effects. Good, that's also nice to hear. -1 to any rolls, so... What, that would be -1 to hit and -1 to wound? Yeah, pretty good spell, to be honest. Now, I'm imagining that the knights on foot are going to be pretty beefy, so that's going to be amazing. Same thing like with the knights and so on, as long as they are a little bit stronger than they used to be, because the hand weapons were just poor. Don't get me wrong, if you use them with lancers, obviously, for a charge, that was amazing. But, like, they were kind of crap after the charge, you know? So this should actually be better for that. And finally, Stormcall. So this is a hex, casting value of 7+, range of 12 inches. Until your next start of turn subphase, the target enemy unit suffers a -1 modifier to its movement and initiative characteristics to a minimum of 1. If this spell is cast, the effects of any other hexes previously cast on the target unit immediately expire. Okay, yeah, makes sense. So you can't multi-cast hexes on enemies. This is again a thing that was a grey area in certain tournaments, so some TOs would say, oh yeah, you can, and some would say not. This is going to be better, and this incentivizes you to cast spells into other units too, rather than focus down. I mean, you're still going to probably want to focus down with different types of spells into a big unit of Black Orcs or Phoenix Guard and stuff like that. So yeah, overall, cool. In summary, though the magic system may be simplified from editions past, it retains its tactical depth. Your spells can still change the course of the game, but they're more blended into the action, leading to a smoother experience. What's more, because the ranges have been cut short for both spells and dispels, canny generals have to put a lot more thought into where they station their wizards and how they're used, both in casting their own spells and countering enemy magic. Next week, we'll be investigating the Grail Knights, living saints and exemplars of the Bretonnian way of life, and how they interact with the universal special rules. So we're getting specific articles on specific units. That is absolutely bizarre. I imagine it's because the Grail Knights are going to have a stupid amount of rules. I mean, it makes sense because they are Grail Knights. The thing is, that means I'm going to have to start painting up Grail Knights. This is what's going to happen, right? I've got a bunch of metal ones, right? And I'm going to read rules and be wanting to paint those up when I really should be focusing on other units. But yeah, I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. Everything seems pretty good, and so far I like the magic system. I know some people are going to have some pushback, but from what I've been reading, it looks interesting and it sounds really interesting. I can't wait to play. We pretty much know that release is happening early next year, so it won't be too long until we can all hit the table, guys. This is pretty cool. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion.